Imagine walking into your favorite store and noticing that the price tags on everyday items have suddenly jumped. Behind the scenes, one major reason for this could be tariffs, a special kind of tax placed on goods that are brought into the country from abroad. A tariff is essentially a fee that makes imported products more expensive, and it's a tool governments use to influence what people buy. The idea is simple. By making foreign goods costlier, tariffs encourage shoppers to choose products made at home, supporting local businesses and workers. This approach is meant to boost the domestic economy and protect jobs, especially in industries facing tough competition from overseas. In 2025, President Trump made headlines by dramatically increasing tariffs, especially targeting goods imported from China. The administration argued that these measures were necessary to defend American industries and bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. The new policy imposed a combined tariff rate of 55% on a wide range of Chinese imports. This sharp increase escalated trade tensions between the two countries, leading to heated negotiations and uncertainty for businesses on both sides of the Pacific. But these tariffs didn't just affect international relations, they had immediate visible consequences for American consumers. Suddenly, many products that families relied on became noticeably more expensive. When U.S. companies import goods, they're the ones who pay the tariff up front. But rather than absorbing the extra cost, most businesses pass it along to shoppers in the form of higher prices. This means that the burden of tariffs is often felt most by ordinary people at the checkout counter. Everyday essentials and big-ticket items alike, from smartphones and laptops to furniture and kitchen appliances, saw price hikes. For many American families, these increases made it harder to stretch their budgets and afford the things they needed. By May 2025, the U.S. government announced it had collected a record $22 billion in tariff revenue in just 1 month. Officials touted this as a sign of strong economic policy and a way to fund government programs. But this money didn't appear out of thin air. It came directly from American businesses who faced higher costs, and from consumers who ultimately paid more for the same products. For small businesses and families, these extra expenses added up quickly. Economists across the country warned that these tariffs would fuel inflation, driving up the cost of living for everyone. As prices rose, many Americans found themselves making tough choices about what they could afford. With wallets stretched thin and uncertainty in the air, the stage was set for a high-stakes economic showdown, one where everyday Americans found themselves caught in the middle, facing the real impact of global trade decisions. No company felt the impact of tariffs more than Walmart, the world's largest retailer. Walmart's promise of everyday low prices depends on sourcing affordable products globally, many from China. When tariffs hit, Walmart warned it couldn't absorb all the extra costs and signaled that price hikes were inevitable. President Trump publicly pressured Walmart to eat the tariffs, but the company's thin profit margins made that impossible. The dilemma: raise prices and risk losing customers, or absorb costs and threaten financial stability. Walmart's CFO called the tariffs inflationary, and the company became a symbol of how trade wars can backfire at home. The policy meant to punish foreign competitors was now squeezing America's biggest retailer and its customers. Tariffs, designed as a weapon, were causing friendly fire, hurting U.S. businesses and families alike. The effects of tariffs quickly showed up in the aisles of Walmart and other retailers. Overnight, familiar shopping trips became a little more stressful, as price tags on everyday items began to creep upward. For many Americans, the impact was immediate and impossible to ignore. Essentials like bicycles, luggage, and even children's car seats saw price hikes, since many components are made in China. Suddenly, what used to be routine purchases for growing families became more expensive, forcing parents to reconsider what they could afford. Even basic groceries weren't immune, as global supply chains meant tariffs rippled through to everyday items. Products that relied on imported ingredients or packaging saw their costs rise, and those increases were passed on to shoppers at checkout. For families on tight budgets, even small increases forced tough choices. Some had to cut back on treats or switch to store brands, while others delayed buying non-essentials altogether. The weekly grocery run became a careful balancing act. The Federal Reserve warned that businesses would pass these costs to consumers, fueling inflation. Economists cautioned that rising prices could slow economic growth and put additional strain on households already feeling the pinch. Retailers across the country faced the same pressures, creating a widespread rise in prices. Store managers scrambled to adjust pricing, and many shoppers noticed that sales and discounts became less generous. The intended goal was to protect American jobs, but the immediate effect was a squeeze on household finances. Families found themselves stretching every dollar, rethinking their spending habits and worrying about what the future might hold. Shoppers faced higher prices for basics, and many began searching for cheaper alternatives. Some turned to discount stores while others relied more heavily on coupons and price comparison apps to make ends meet. The tariff storm was changing the way Americans shopped, sometimes pushing them to look beyond U.S. borders for relief. As families adapted, the ripple effects of tariffs continued to shape daily life, one shopping basket at a time. Walmart didn't just pass every new cost to customers, it fought back. The company pressured suppliers to share the burden and leaned on its private brands, shifting production where possible to avoid tariffs. By controlling more of the supply chain, Walmart shielded some products from the full impact. Still, the sheer scale of the tariffs meant some price increases were unavoidable. Walmart had to balance absorbing costs with raising prices, protecting its reputation while staying afloat. Smaller retailers lacking Walmart's leverage struggled even more. Some went bankrupt under the pressure. Even for a giant like Walmart, the tariff storm forced a change in its core promise: low prices for all. While U.S. shoppers faced rising prices, Canadians saw a different story. Canada wasn't locked in the same tariff war, so retailers there kept prices stable on imported goods. Suddenly, Canadian stores became the more affordable option, reversing years of cross-border shopping trends. American shoppers, once lured by U.S. bargains, now found better deals north of the border. Canadian retailers gained a competitive edge, offering price stability and certainty. The contrast was stark chaos and inflation in the U.S., predictability in Canada. Canadian businesses, from furniture stores to supermarkets, benefited from the shift. The tariff policy meant to help U.S. retailers was now boosting their Canadian rivals. The economic gap at the checkout was reshaping cross-border shopping habits. The price gap between the U.S. and Canada didn't go unnoticed, especially in border towns. For many Americans, a trip to Canada became a practical way to save money on essentials. Electronics, home goods, and clothing, often cheaper in Canada, drew U.S. shoppers across the border. This shift meant American dollars were flowing into Canadian stores, boosting their sales. Canadian retailers near the border welcomed the influx, seeing more U.S. license plates and credit cards. The tariff policy, meant to protect American business, was sending shoppers, and their money, abroad. For families, saving money outweighed loyalty to Made in America. The Canadian border became an unexpected economic relief valve for U.S. consumers. Tariffs triggered a global scramble as companies rushed to move production out of China. Decades of investment in Chinese manufacturing were suddenly at risk. Tech giants like Apple shifted iPhone production to India, bypassing U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. Nvidia and others reoriented their strategies, cutting China out of future plans. Vietnam, Mexico, and India became new manufacturing hubs, but the transition was costly and chaotic. Companies faced supply chain disruptions, quality control issues, and new logistical headaches. The goal was to avoid tariffs, not necessarily to bring jobs back to the U.S. The result: global capital flowed to the path of least resistance, creating winners and losers worldwide. The tariffs didn't revive U.S. manufacturing, they just rerouted the supply chain. By mid-2025, the economic data was clear. Tariffs were driving up costs across the board. U.S. tariff revenue hit record highs, but it came at the expense of businesses and consumers. The average tariff rate soared to levels not seen since the 1930s, fundamentally shifting trade policy. Corporate America was anxious. Earnings calls were dominated by talk of tariffs and inflation. CEOs warned investors about squeezed margins and unpredictable futures. The Federal Reserve identified tariffs as a major inflation risk, confirming what retailers had warned for months. The U.S. dollar weakened as confidence in the economic outlook faded. Meanwhile, Canada's inflation remained more stable, thanks to its avoidance of sweeping tariffs. The numbers told a simple story: U.S. policy was making life more expensive, while Canada benefited from stability. By mid-2025, the US and Canada found themselves on sharply diverging economic paths, a split that became most visible in the everyday act of grocery shopping. What once felt like a shared North American experience now revealed stark contrasts at the checkout counter. For American families, the reality of higher prices set in as tariffs continued to drive up the cost of everyday goods. Shoppers who once took affordable groceries for granted now faced tough choices, weighing each item and searching for ways to stretch every dollar. Discount retailers and private label brands surged in popularity, becoming lifelines for families determined to make ends meet. Shoppers compared prices more carefully than ever, often switching brands or stores in search of the best deals. Meanwhile, cross-border shopping in Canada transformed from a niche activity into a mainstream strategy. Americans living near the border flocked north, hoping to find relief from rising prices and take advantage of favorable exchange rates and lower tariffs. U.S. retailers, especially those close to the border, struggled as more customers chose to shop in Canada. Once busy American stores saw fewer shoppers, while Canadian stores near the border thrived, bustling with both locals and cross-border visitors. For Canada, the tariff war brought both opportunity and risk. Retailers enjoyed a surge in business, but there was always the looming threat that a sudden shift in U.S. policy could change everything overnight. The lesson was clear: trade policies in one country can have huge, often unintended effects on its neighbors. The economic fortunes of the U.S. and Canada, once closely linked, now moved in different directions, shaped by decisions made far from the checkout line. American families now had to navigate a pricier, more uncertain retail landscape, adjusting their habits and expectations as they coped with the new reality. Canadian families, on the other hand, enjoyed a temporary bargain, filling their carts with goods that felt like a windfall. Yet even they knew that this advantage might not last forever. Ultimately, it's the numbers on the price tags, not political promises or headlines, that will shape the future for shoppers on both sides of the border, reminding everyone how interconnected and fragile these economic ties can be.